All right, welcome back, everyone. I wasn't sure how to address this video at first because there's just a lot going on. I've talked to several people lately about the whole wokeists or wokeism, the SJWs, and I really don't think that a lot of what the SJWs or the wokeism people have to offer is very intellectual. In fact, it's very anti-intellectual. And we've got some major problems in this country that we really need to be focusing on as opposed to identity. Your political identity, your sexual orientation identity, your sex identity, your identity as a female, your identity as a male, your ethnic identity. There is a lot of stuff going on in the United States that is so much more important than a non-binary person getting upset because somebody doesn't really understand their pronouns of Z and Zer, or the idea that Dave Chappelle said that there was only two genders. There's some way bigger issues than that, bigger issues than even your political affiliation. And that's really what I want to talk about. So I'm going to talk about my own personal story to sort of segue into this issue. Many people who watch my channel know that I have a condition called neurogenic thoracic outlet syndrome. And it is the compression of the brachial plexus. So I've had 5 nerves compressed for 5 to 6 years, and I have atrophy and nerve damage in my arm. I have applied for disability and denied twice on the basis that I have made at least or more $1,300 per month. And the reason why is because, well, I was trying to survive. The situation with the most current employer that I've had is that they want to play secret accommodations. So the company that is in charge of handling the accommodation requests and paperwork, I've been told not to send my restrictions or accommodations to them to process that claim. So the company I work for, nor the company that handles their accommodation claims, has any paperwork or awareness of my disability due to a chronic pain syndrome that I have. So as far as they're concerned, it doesn't exist because there's no paperwork. And if I do turn it in, then I will get taken off the schedule and lose my job. So here's the thing, is that I apply for disability and I can't get it. And people have actually asked me, why have you been declined for disability? Well, I'm not sure. Like I said, the SSA said themselves that I made money. And the reason for making that money, like I said, was to try to survive. If you read the fine print on the SSA's outlining of filing for disability, it's almost like they pretty much basically expect you to go 2 years without working due to your disability. Now, I don't know about you, but I personally cannot think of how a person is supposed to survive for 2 years without a paycheck while still paying for all of their bills. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. There is the idea or the idea or the prospect that someone in that person's life should be fiscally responsible for them. I think that's inappropriate, especially being a full-grown adult. I should be self-sufficient and independent. Personally, I'm willing to work, but the problem is finding an employer that will actually accommodate me with my restrictions that I have. Many of them say that they will and then don't, and many of them say that they just can't, which I would prefer them do that because at least they're being honest. And a lot of employers that can accommodate won't because they don't want to have to deal with the They just don't want the responsibility of it. They don't want to deal with it. And it's unfortunate. But the company is basically making they've found a legal loophole where they don't have to accommodate people. They do things by creating a job code, for example. And so while there's many things that employer could have you do that meets the restriction requirements, they're going to say we can't meet the restriction requirements because there's no job code where you do those specific things that you actually can do and stay away from the things that you can't. And in case you were wondering what my restrictions are, first of all, I have a DASH score of 95. The DASH score is assessed by a medical professional, and it stands for disability of arm, shoulder, and hand. I'm 95%. I'm 5% away from having my right arm 100% disabled and unusable. So my restrictions are no lifting, pushing, pulling, anything over 5 pounds, no overhead reaching past chest level, and no repetitive motion, including sitting at a keyboard for more than 30 minutes. And the way that the disability thing is set up, it's almost like, and I said this to an SSA representative, I told them, it's almost like you don't want to actually help someone until they're living in a cardboard box. And by that time, you can't help someone because not only do they probably not have a bank account, they don't have an address. In order to file for SSI and SSDI, you have to have an address and not a P.O. box number. You are also required to have a phone so that they can get a hold of you. If you don't have those things, you won't be approved. So that seems like a system that's designed to fail from the get-go. And people have asked me, well, why is it like that? I have no idea, but there has been a certain constituent of people that have been yelling and screaming for a very, very long time that so SSI, SSDI are just a means to keep people comfortable who are lazy and don't want to work, and the majority of people who are on SSI and SSDI are just lazy, don't want to work, and milking the system. So that puts me in a very precarious situation because I'm struggling to find an employer that will actually accommodate me, if they even can at all, and struggling with, if I can't find one, applying for disability, which I keep getting denied, and I could be denied for 2 years until I finally get approved. And I'm supposed to find a way to survive financially until then. I went to the Workforce Partnership, which is a state social service program in the state that I live in. It used to be attached to the SRS, Social Rehabilitation Services, but now it's its own thing for some reason. Since the outbreak of COVID, they have not been assigning social workers to people. But after explaining my situation to them, they absolutely agreed that my current employer situation of secret accommodations is unacceptable, and that due to my restrictions, I really need a social worker. And I agreed with them. I said, yes, I do. By the way, when I told the SSA person, it's almost like they don't want to help you until you're in a box, and by that time they can't help you because you don't have an address. She laughed and she agreed with me. So when I called the Workforce Partnership, which is the social program that I was talking about, after I explained my situation, not only did they say you need a social worker, the first question she actually asked me was, have you tried applying for disability? And the answer is yes. So another question I have is, do you think that my partner, who I'm not officially married to, should be fiscally responsible for me? Which I personally don't think that they should. I don't think he should. Because for one, I'm a grown adult, and when a person has to take care or become fiscally responsible for a grown adult, it becomes very taxing and annoying. And if he left me because of a situation like that, I really personally wouldn't blame him, which brings me back around full circle of what is the solution to this problem. So I am talking about this because there are issues in this country that people are ignoring in a really big way. They're really big problems. Tent cities are a big fucking problem. They are not just on Skid Row in California. I am so sick of people automatically, as soon as I say tent cities, they say, well, but California. They're not just in California. They're coast to coast. They are in every major city, including my own. One of my friends went under a bridge here in the city that I lived in and saw 50 people living there in tents. The UN actually set its eye on the United States. The person who does the reports on public health care crises in third world and developing nations has in recent years turned its eye on United States because of tent cities. The reason why is because there is human shit on the sidewalks. Putting shit on the sidewalks and in the streets is not something that has been practiced in Western civilization for over 300 years. And I think that that's a real problem. The fact that it's in every major city, whether it's democratically ran or Republican ran, it's in every major city. There are tent cities and there is literally human shit on the sidewalk and in the streets. Why is this a public health concern? Well, because if you have human shit all over the streets and the sidewalk, then we're looking at outbreaks of whooping cough, tuberculosis, and cholera, diseases that we have not had a problem with in Western civilization, predominantly and specifically to this country, since the 1800s. That's really embarrassing. And to the people out there that call themselves patriotic or patriots or, unfortunately, nationalists, there's a big difference between patriotism and nationalism. Nationalism is dogmatic, patriotism isn't. But whether you address yourself as a nationalist or a patriot, you should be embarrassed. We are essentially, the United States is basically being called a third world shithole, a developing country, because other Western nations don't have this problem. And one of the issues in these tent cities is the majority of these homeless people that live in these tent cities are either mentally or physically disabled. So think about the situation I just told you with my own personal situation. Another really big issue that's hitting the United States is the opiate epidemic. And the opiate epidemic doesn't just affect chronic pain patients. It affects chronic pain patients because it's made getting opiate pain medications virtually impossible if you're a chronic pain patient. But second of all, it hurts doctors because we're arresting doctors by the dozens because they're prescribing opiate pain medications to chronic pain patients. Thirdly, it's affecting people who have OUD, opiate use disorder, which is a fancy way of saying opiate addiction. And the reason why it's affecting them is because when the CDC and the DEA and the DOA launched a campaign against opiates and medications, it's also put a hindrance on doctors and their ability to prescribe Suboxone, duloxetine, and it's really hard to be able to deliver methadone to people. Suboxone, duloxetine, and methadone are medications or drugs that we can use to treat OUD, opiate use disorder, just the same way as we use drugs and medications nowadays to treat things like alcoholism or other substance use disorders. It would seem that opiate OUD is the only one that is exempt from this. We do have drugs, medications that we can use to treat OUD. And for some reason, the government or the DEA and the CDC says doctors can only prescribe 275 prescriptions of Suboxone or duloxetine per year. That's not helpful. There's tons of people out there during the scourge of an opiate epidemic that could be treating OUD with medications that have been proven to be extremely effective, and they can't do it. There's waiting lists to see these doctors that can prescribe it because you have to have a special license to prescribe them. That is ridiculous. So it's hurting chronic pain patients, doctors, and people who suffer from OUD or heroin addiction. That's completely counterproductive. The other thing is that I have talked about on this channel an organization called Citizen Go. This is an organization that wants to commit human rights violations. All of these issues, it doesn't matter if you're on the right, it doesn't matter if you're on the left, it doesn't matter if you're a homosexual, it doesn't matter if you're trans, it doesn't matter if you're non-binary, it doesn't matter if you're a POC, it doesn't matter if you're male, it doesn't matter if you're female. These things affect everyone. And right now, as it is, when looking at things like tent cities, for example, I'm not going to get on the opiate one. That's a different story altogether. But tent cities that I'm looking at, something has got to give. I mean, if the social safety nets are not what we want in the United States, then employers have to have the ability not just to be able to hire people, but they have to accommodate people with mental and physical disabilities. And if they're not going to because it's by choice, then you are talking about proposing a regulation on them to make them do it. And if we don't like that answer, then we go back to the social safety nets and we start talking about improving in the system that we live in. And the thing is okay, look, we're not going to wake up in anarchy. We're not going to wake up in communism. We're not going to wake up in fascism. And we're not going to wake up in anarcho-capitalism. The system that we currently live in is a mixed economy of capitalism and socialism, predominantly capitalism. Socialism is a tidbit. It's just SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare. You have some public funded stuff. The military takes the major slice of the pie on this one. And so to strengthen or update our social safety nets to accommodate for the massive amount of inflation that is compounding us on the face here in the United States right now, we would have to update it because currently, as well, actually Biden just currently did something, but just a month ago, let's say, SSI only got you $700 a month, and you could move into an apartment that cost $400 or $500. But you have to understand, if you're on SSI, they also require you to have a phone, and you have to pay for that out of pocket. You also have to pay for your utilities out of pocket. They give you food stamps, but it hasn't been updated with the inflation that's been compounding on us. And that leads to another regulation that could be proposed is price control on food or rent. And that's something that right-leaning economic people say, I don't like. So the question is like, given the situation that I've laid out for you personally for myself, what do you think the answer is? Because something has got to give. If it's not social safety nets, SSI, SSDI, and Medicaid and Medicare, then I'll tell you, I'm willing to work. The problem is I cannot do fast-paced anymore. I cannot do physical labor anymore. So what employer can hire me? What employer can accommodate me? And that's not the only question. The other question is, will they actually? And that's just as important, because a lot of the times they don't. And so it's like, what am I supposed to do? What is the answer to this? And think about it. There's thousands thousands of people living in these tent cities that are in the same situation, where they've got a mental or physical disability, and that's why they're there. So if we don't want to propose stipulations or regulations on these, and I don't want to bring small mom and pop businesses into this. I understand, I'm not stupid. I understand that they don't have the ability or that they don't have the resources that major multi-conglomerate corporations have to pull together to make things like this work. I understand that. I think most people who talk like me get that more than most people would even know. But if telling a major multi-conglomerate corporation you have to accommodate somebody with a disability as a no-no, and then if we're going to say that social safety nets are a no-no, things like SSI, SSDI are a no-no because that's big government and big taxation. Or if you think that I should apply for disability, you should ask yourself what policies are in place that have made it so ridiculous to get. Because the point should be to keep you from going to living in a box in the first place. The thing is, we live in a circular economy. And if the people who live in this society cannot be consumers, the whole idea of the circular economy breaks down because you don't have people going out and buying things that perpetuate a consumeristic economy. The people who are rich, the top 1%, the reason why they're there is because people can be consumer and consume their products. And if we can't do that, especially with things that are not needed, things like PlayStation 5s, which is just a video game console, is just entertainment. It's not a need, it's a want. We're not perpetuating economic growth or some kind of industrial boom or growth itself. The circular economy breaks down because it stagnates. And that's not what you want. You're talking about economic collapse at that point. So if the social safety nets aren't good, then what? What is the answer here? Like, can we even meet in the middle and say, can we try social safety nets at least until we get this economic problem under control? Or are we going to wait until we have a tuberculosis outbreak and whooping cough and cholera? Diseases of which that can wipe out entire families within a week. Diseases that we haven't had an outbreak of since the 1800s. Our human shit being in the street. The human shit being in the street, that hasn't been done in 300 years. This is really embarrassing. This is not looking like a first world nation. It's looking like a third world shithole or a developing country. The problem is we don't have a bump stop in our economic system that says the lowest denomination of quality of life is shelter, controlled environment, food, health care, and water. So if we don't define that as the bare minimum, that's as low as you can possibly get within the society, which is what most Western countries have done. Other than us, we're the only ones that haven't. I think there's even some third world countries that have done this. I know that Saudi Arabia has this. So I think this is interesting. It's like, what do we do? Well, some of the answers that have been proposed to me from right-leaning economic people have been cutting taxes. And they say that this will make it so that the big multi-conglomerate corporations will be able to hire more people. But are they going to accommodate for people's disabilities? They don't want to. So what do? The other idea is that cutting taxes will make things cheaper. But I almost feel like, in a way, that cutting taxes is almost like your CFO saying, I just saved a bunch of money by switching my car insurance to Geico. And it's like all the people that work underneath this CFO It's like, well, what does that have to fucking do with them? How does that helps that CFO save money, but is it helping all the people that work for them on a minimum wage average that doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the standard of living? I really think that the right-leaning economic people, like, I know that there has to be something that existed before Reaganomics that was an economic idea that was predicated to the right. I'm just saying maybe we let go of this whole idea that if the rich have more money, that it trickles down. I don't think that works. I think it's a dead idea. So I want to know, what is the solution? Because something's got to give here. We cannot have a massive amount of tent cities from East Coast to West Coast where we're worried about outbreaks of diseases we haven't seen since the 1800s because there's human shit on the fucking sidewalks, in the fucking streets. And we haven't seen that in at least 300 fucking years. Possibly longer. I mean, there are civilizations that are centuries old that came up with the idea of sanitation through a system of sewage. I think this is a real problem. And it's not, and if anyone from the far right wants to comment on it, I know the far right would probably say, I usually the far right, the ethno-nationalist type people, if anyone says that disabled people are useless to society and they should be put to death, I am not going to take a comment like that seriously. That is not addressing the issue. That is not a resolution. That is the most anti-humanitarian thing anyone could ever say, ever. So no, I'm not going to accept that as a response. I want to hear from libertarians and Republicans, rational, right-leaning economic, my rational right-leaning economic friends. So if any alt-right troll finds their way and makes a comment like that, just know I'm not even going to comment on it, because I'm not going to take something like that seriously, because it's not that's not a serious nothing. No, I'm not doing that. And you need to understand, this is something that can affect people regardless if you are far right. All three of those things that I just mentioned can affect you too. And if you're a non-binary person, SJW's a wokeist person, again, this is stuff that can affect you too. Anyone can become a chronic pain patient and then have a disability. Most people will eventually develop a chronic pain condition by the time they reach 65 and up. It's almost inevitable. And if you think that it's okay to sit there and say, we're not going to have opiate medications, wait until you reach that age and understand there are levels of pain that you can exist with that are unbearable and absolutely debilitating. And so choose your words wisely if you say we should get rid of opiate pain medication. I would say, no, we shouldn't. That is a bad idea. And unfortunately, you're not going to figure out that it's a bad idea until you become a chronic pain patient and you realize, holy shit, this is very high levels of pain. And popping Tylenol and ibuprofen like candy is not a good idea. That can destroy your liver. It can destroy your kidneys. It'll eat away the lining of your stomach and can kill you. The biggest medical concern with prescribing long-term opiate pain medication for chronic pain patients is a side effect. And the biggest medical concern is the side effect of constipation. And that's it. Other medications that they use for chronic pain, such as gabapentin and Cymbalta or Halidol, which are psychiatric medications. Another form of medication they like to use for chronic pain is a medication that's meant for Alzheimer's and dementia. And the thing is that those medications, there's a grocery list of major medical concerns from long-term use of those medications. They don't talk about that. That's a different video. But the tent cities, that affects everyone. The opiate epidemic, that affects everyone. Citizen Go, that affects everyone. So the question is, what do we do about this? We need to stop this petty bickering of own the libtards or own the artards. We need to start having intelligent conversations and really trying to come up with solutions to this. I'm not so sure that cutting taxes and trickle-down economics is what's going to fix it. I personally think the best solution is, one, either get the companies to actually accommodate people, or two, strengthen our social safety nets in this country. Well, that's what I was going to say. The system that we live in currently is a mixed economy of socialism and capitalism. I might have already said this, I'm not sure. Predominantly capitalism, and it's ran by a government that is a constitutional republic. And in a constitutional republic, you do have elements of democracy in it, of democratic stuff. That's part of it. The republic is basically a democracy hybrid. But technically, our country is a constitutional republic. Aside from that, what are people going on about? SJW is going on about what? Dave Chappelle saying there's only two genders, or people on the right complaining about Kaepernick taking a knee. And or somebody wants you to be really, really, really concerned about their non-binary pronouns. And I'm like, you know what? That's nice. There are literally thousands of people living in fucking tent cities shitting on the fucking street. Most of them have mental or physical disabilities. Doctors are going to prison by the fucking dozens, being tried as drug traffickers for treating patients with chronic pain conditions. Chronic pain patient suicide rate is up 470%. The 59% of America's population is in what the federal government considers on poverty or below it. 59%. That's 59% of Americans that don't have access to a $300 emergency fund. And when people bring up that point, I don't think they're saying that the government needs to give them money so they have more, that they have access to a $300 emergency fund. It's just trying to shine a spotlight on something that is a major intrinsic problem. And it's not something that can just only happen to a leftist or a non-binary or POC or any of that shit. This can affect literally anyone who lives in this country. And so I want to know from the right leaning, from my Republican and libertarian friends, what do you think is the answer to this? What is a realistic solution? Can we do something like the social welfare programs, just what we're calling socialism? Can we do that at least for a short period or something? Like, something's got to give. And I think it's weird, too, that people are afraid of socialism because America did it before, back in the 1920s, before Soviet Russia was even a thing. And on top of that, even Richard Nixon imposed price control. And I'm not saying it's something that should be permanent, maybe just temporary until before our economy just gets pulled out from underneath our feet. And if you think that the rich billionaires that live in this country will stay that way forever, and a society with no consumers, with an entire, just this huge economic collapse, no, probably not. They won't have anyone to make money off of, unless they're still selling things to our European allies across the pond, and they just happen to reside here in the United States. But that doesn't help our society out whatsoever. So I want to know a reasonable response. Like, what is an idea on the table? What is something that we can compromise on? I don't think that we should wait until there is an outbreak of tuberculosis or cholera and we have thousands of people dying from that, from a disease we haven't seen since the 1800s. This shit is seriously embarrassing. The UN has actually done a report on it's like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. I'm going to show you a screenshot of this tent city stuff.
This was the last warning sign for you, for me. I let you think that I eat all the strange fruit you breed.
These tent cities are, like I said, they're everywhere. Even in my city, we have them. Driving out to St. Louis, I saw them there too. They are everywhere. This is getting bad. I don't feel like I should have to emphasize the fact that there's human shit all over the sidewalk. Cities are having to pay people to go and spray it into the sewage system because it literally is, no joke, a public health crisis. So it's something that's been weighing heavily on my mind. That's my rant. I mean, I'm not an SJW. I don't get offended by I don't get offended by right-leaning economic political philosophies. I'm not offended by them, but we need to come up with something and be productive in fixing this. I don't care that Kaepernick is taking a knee. That is not a big concern of mine. I don't care about a non-binary person's non-binary pronouns. That is not what concerns me. What is concerning me is something that three different things that affect the nation as a whole. Nonpartisan issues here. And we need to figure out what to do about them. Oh, the thing that Biden passed that actually helped the social security safety nets, the social safety nets we have in this country. People on SSI and SSDI got an extra $80 a month on their lousy checks. SSI in most states, the majority of states, is a maximum of $700 a month, if you didn't know, and $1,300 a month for SSDI, if you didn't know. So I really think that I've laid out my ideas, like social safety, improving those social safety nets, the socialism we have in this country, or some kind of regulation or something that says that companies that they used to have to, I don't know why they don't have to anymore, but they have to make some kind of effort to accommodate people with disabilities because, like I said, I'm willing to work. I just can't do fast-paced or physical labor anymore. I can't. It's physically impossible. I might be able to, if we stopped this whole let's not prescribe pain medications to chronic pain patients, that would make things easier too. We need to come up with something. So I would like to hear from my libertarian and Republican friends what their ideas are. I think we should be discussing things like this instead of what some SJW bitch said. It's just not important. What's important is tent cities. What's important is the opiate epidemic. What's important is an organization that wants to basically get rid of civil rights, liberties, and freedoms, or violate them on a massive scale. So, okay, that's my rant. I support the idea of choice is not one's ability to impose one's will on others. And with that, I'm out.